Did he not understand the implications that John Dehlin was making? Like, did he just miss it?
This is a real thing.
And he denied the cannibalism.
He had to do a public...
Without anyone having, like, accused him of it.
You can't say someone's bad and then act later like everybody's saying this person... No, you did, guy. Yeah. Like, you did.
If you are one of the key intellectual figures of the church and you have Elder Holland specifically calling for our intellectual class for a little more musket fire defending the faith, and then you go on to do a weekly news show with the biggest anti-Mormon out there, and you are essentially giving him credibility by doing that and not basically pushing back against him, what are you doing?
Welcome back to Midnight Strike Through Mormons. I'm your host, Cardinellis. I'm joined in the studio by Kwaku L, Brad Whitbeck, Jacob Hansen, and Cody the Oracle. He's our non-member, half-Jewish, half-Catholic friend who's going to give us a voice of reason and a third-party opinion during this podcast as we talk about a recent podcast that was done, Mormon News Weekly, with one Patrick Mason, Jana Reiss, and John Dehlin. I do have to say before we start, you take issue with this, Jacob Hansen. You apparently have a problem with how Patrick Mason defended himself, and I'm going to let you dive right in. I just have to say, though, before you do, John Dehlin, I think he's a genius. He only allows people on his program that will cede ground about how bad the church is in hopes that he'll cede ground back and they'll hopefully get along in the middle somewhere, but he never does. And he won't let anybody on his show that can outflank him, outsmart him, outtalk him, anything like that. He only lets the people on that will speak evil of the church and the Lord's anointed. And so I think he's a genius. He plays him like a fiddle. I know he's your boy. I think he got a little bit played though. And you really had a problem with it, apparently more than I did, but hit it. Tell us what happened.
So the thing is you have to remember Patrick Mason is up there in the top sort of intellectuals in the church, right? He used to be the head of the Mormon History Association. This is someone who is published by Deseret Book. This is someone who newscasters interview fairly regularly. I mean, he's someone who's very well known.
He's a historian who worked on the gospel topic essays, right? So he knows his stuff.
All right, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay, cool. Keep going. So what did he do wrong? Where did he go wrong?
Problem is that when you're a Latter-day Saint and you need to defend the church from somebody like John Dehlin, the most outspoken anti-Mormon out there, and now you're going to do a weekly show with him, I would expect, okay, if you're going to invite Korihor onto your show, you're going to give him the Alma treatment. That's what you're supposed to do.
Are you saying there was not enough pushback? And we're going to throw this to Cody, by the way, and we're going to have him see some of these clips and see what he thinks from an outsider's perspective.
Well, the first thing I do want to say, though, just as a caveat, Patrick Mason, I don't have anything against Patrick Mason. I think he's a good guy. But the problem is that if you are one of the key intellectual figures of the church and you have Elder Holland specifically calling for our intellectual class for a little more musket fire defending the faith, and then you go on to do a weekly news show with the biggest anti-Mormon out there, and you are essentially giving him credibility by doing that and not basically pushing back against him, what are you doing?
See, I don't have problem with engagement. I don't think somebody's guilty by association. People have tried to accuse us of that when we interview, Doctrine of Christ people and so on and so forth. However, I will say it does seem like his tent is pointed towards Sodom when he does not have a problem agreeing with some of the worst straw man arguments of the church in such what is a perceivably easy way. I don't think these guys, and sometimes I feel falls into this trap, I don't feel like they realize how badly they're being used. You know what I'm saying? And it definitely seems that they come from a presuppositionalist argument that they're right out there, not us in here. Now, before we throw the dude under the bus, though, and say things like his tent is pointed towards Sodom, like I just did. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Before we allow ourselves to get away with that, we got to make sure, that we're being fair here. So in order to be fair, we brought our buddy Cody in. He's going to, look at some of these clips with us and he's going to see, hey, is this guy on our side or what? So, Jacob, lead the conversation, man.
Yeah,
Tell us what's up.
so Patrick he did this episode with John, and frankly, I walked away with it feeling like, okay, how would I sum up what I had just heard? Right. And I think these 4 things were implied, at the very least they were implied. Okay, not said explicitly.
So is the name of this podcast going to be like how to not defend the kingdom?
Something like that. Yeah. Yeah. I would,
cool.
Misfiring muskets. Right?
Okay.
Exactly. And
by the way, will you notice how Cody did not cringe as we make these musket jokes?
yes.
You know what I'm saying? I think that's a little bit telling right there. We'll fill you in on that one later, Cody.
Yes.
But anyway, keep going.
So the 4 implications that I got out of this, it was their second episode that they had done together, was first and foremost was that the church is harmful to gay people. I think that was implied in their message.
Yeah,
that
okay.
Elder Holland is in particular dangerous or bigoted or towards gay people, or at least is perceived.
The Mr. Rogers of Mormonism.
He's dangerous?
We'll
that?
get into the clips. What was said and what was implied. That's the thing. I also want to say not everything has to be explicit for it to be like, okay, this is what they're driving at here.
Anti-Mormons thrive on vagaries. Yes.
And then the church protects sexual predators.
Lie.
And the church is dishonest with its membership numbers. Okay? So you watch an episode. You have 2 Latter-day Saints. Jana Reiss, by the way, she's an author published by Deseret Book. She also wrote a book called The Ex-mormons. Very famous. She's a journalist. Yeah. So anyway, just want to also do that. So
you forgot Woke Scold?
We have 2 faithful members of the church.
She's creative with her tithing.
What? Could you real? Okay.
2 faithful members that are influential who are with the biggest anti-Mormon out there. And what do? Is they basically seed ground, retreat, and kind of hem and haw and are like, yeah, we kind of got problems with these issues as John Dehlin kind of brings them up. So
they did the exact opposite of what Elon Musk did in his BBC interview. Where he said, wait, you say Twitter is full of hate speech. Name me one example. And then when the guy can't name one example, he's like, well, you said your whole feed was full of it, so just give me one. Well, I'll just say, so you can't. So if you say you can do something you can't, you're lying. They didn't get the Elon Musk treatment. Okay, so keep going.
So I think to start off, especially for you, Cody, I want to talk about the Elder Holland issue. It was actually at the end of the episode, but I want to start with it because to me it was just like the most shocking. I felt like.
Okay, so do we want to show the Mormon News Weekly clip first, or do you want to?
Let's show what Elder Holland said about musket fire. And I'll give some of the context before we get into the Mormon News clip.
So, all right, Cody, we're going to fill you in. This is one of the biggest controversies in the past 12 months that anti-Mormons have against the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This right here is one Elder Holland. He's the Mr. Rogers of Mormonism. Looks like everybody's nice old grandpa, and he loves everybody. He's always giving speeches about how we have to love our neighbors so much and help them out with service projects and this and that. Well, he came to BYU, which is the flagship educational institution of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And when all the woke stuff was happening during COVID, he made an analogy of people that built the university, both with trowels and muskets. And we'll let him speak for himself, and you can tell me if you thought what he said was controversial.
Quoted our colleague, Elder Neil A. Maxwell, who had said, and I quote, "In a way, Latter-day Saint scholars at BYU and elsewhere are a little bit like the builders of the temple in Nauvoo, who worked with a trowel in one hand and a musket in the other. Today, scholars building the temple of learning must also pause on occasion to defend the kingdom. I personally think," Elder Maxwell went on to say, "this is one of the reasons the Lord established and maintains this university. The dual role of builder and defender is unique and ongoing. I'm grateful we have scholars today who can handle, as it were, both trowel and musket." Then Elder Oaks said challengingly, "I'd like to hear a little more musket fire from the Temple of Learning."
Okay, anything catching your eye so far, Cody, just in these first minute or two?
I mean, it's an analogy. I can definitely see how some people could, if they want to, take it however they want. But I don't know. Sounds like an analogy to me.
Okay, cool. What do you think would be the worst case scenario?
No, I mean, people could just be like, I talked about guns, he's promoting violence. That's what I imagine to be the immediate criticism.
Do you feel like there was anything in that promoting violence against other people to say to defend the faith?
Personally, don't. I can see how if someone disingenuously just didn't like him, they would take that stance. But I mean, personally,
so if they were disingenuous, they might try and take that stance. But you, being a genuine person, watching this without an agenda,
genuine and handsome.
Very handsome.
All right. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, I assume that this individual does not literally mean people should be out there harming people. That didn't seem to be the point of the message.
You mean he wasn't literally advocating people go get an 18th century weapon?
No.
And learn to
muzzle-loaded blunderbuss. Okay, well, you are in the minority, Cody, and you got the answer wrong. Because the advocate said that the Mormon apostle encouraged everyone to take up muskets against not just LGBTQ plus equality, but other articles suggested directly dragging them behind the shed and putting direct violence on them that cannot be mentioned on YouTube, but involves gunpowder and musket balls. And so now this has gone down in this year's history as the great crime of the century. So anyway, they talk about it. Is this the clip that you want us to show here?
Yeah, well, but real quick, a little bit of context on this one before we get into it. So John Dehlin, he freaked out about this when it happened, did a bunch of content about it. Patrick Mason went out and went after Elder Holland and said this was like bad use of language. Jana Reiss was on board with it. All of three of these interviewees were like, that was bad what he said. Right now, all of them in this interview, just to be fair, they did say, we think Elder Holland's a good guy and, this and that. But the SUU campus, he was invited now, Elder Holland was, to give a commencement address. And they started saying they were going to have protests against Elder Holland speaking there because he is this bigoted man that is advocating for violence against LGBT people because of that little clip that you just heard. Okay, so John Dehlin had on some LGBT people from SUU because that's what he wants to do, is promote those voices complaining against the church. And he, in this clip, on the Mormon News clip, is talking about his experience with those people. So let's listen in.
Let's hit it. Here we go. Jacob Hansen, clip 1.
A Mormon Stories episode with probably 6 or 8 SUU students who are LGBT. And for them, I think they were saying, look, this is a public university, and yes, he's a religious figure who has a degree from Yale, but there are so many other people that could have been chosen who could give phenomenal speeches, who aren't affiliated with a religious tradition that is viewed as by many cases in the LGBT community as hostile to LGBT youth and adults. And I'm not.
Tell me when to pause, man.
Well, I want to first pause. That's a good place to pause.
Okay.
So he's talking about, these people who think the church is harmful to LGBTQ adults and youth. Is he including himself in that crowd? Like, has John Dehlin ever made videos saying the church is harmful to those? Obviously, he's talking about himself and his followers and his people, that this is the way they view the church. So here
couching
he is,
it in a third party mannerism.
Yeah,
okay,
but he's
and with the weasel word of many, so as to keep it vague.
Sure. Okay.
But are you getting the impression here, Cody, that he's implying that the church is, and these messages from the church are harmful to gay people?
Yeah, we kind of almost, he says that, right? But it seems more kind of like because, I don't really know the ins and outs of what's going on in the Mormon community, but these are the same kind of sort of tired arguments that have been recycled politically outside, like in general for a while now. And yeah, it does kind of.
Wait, are you suggesting that progmos, also known as progressive Mormons, are missionaries for political progressivism outside of the church into the church instead of being missionaries of God's love within the church into the outer secular community?
I have definitely heard the idea that, well, this person, I don't like them, I disagree with the things they say, but like, I don't think that's the reason why they shouldn't come. Just other people could have. It's like, okay, I've heard that argument many times. It's very clearly.
There's a lot of people that have this opinion. Yeah,
exactly.
It's the cry-bully tactics. Okay, well,
I want to see how well they defend.
I didn't realize there was 2 episodes of this. There was a second episode. I guess I only watched the first one. Okay, so
yeah, same.
We're gonna keep going here. John Dehlin again. Okay,
saying that's fair. That's just how they feel. Why pick Elder Holland? Why not pick a scholar? Why not pick like a true scholar? other public figures that are less polarizing, especially when we know that there's an LGBTQ depression, anxiety, and or even suicide sort of epidemic historically within the Utah kind of Mormon context. There's so many other people that could have been chosen at a public university. And for the LGBT, students that worked 4 or 6 years to get their undergraduate or graduate degrees, for them to have to sit and listen to a talk by a church leader that they would feel would in some ways deny their rights to engage in legal same-sex committed love, that's just a choice that's unnecessary and maybe inappropriate.
Okay. Do we have to watch more? The only problem with John Dehlin is he really is Korobor. Like,
I just want to hear Cody's reaction to that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, this is where me not really knowing too much outside of just the one clip I saw. I mean, is there any reason why, who was it, the individual speaking of, Elder Holland, I
Elder
believe?
Holland, yeah.
Is there any reason why he in particular would be offensive to LGBT people aside from just being a representative of the Mormon Church? Or is like there things he's done, things he's been accused of?
These would be great things for Patrick Mason to begin to ask him. But what I want to get to...
The answer, though, is no.
Yeah,
Cody.
no.
Like,
okay, so like...
he's Mormon. They just hate him because he's Mormon.
And he said musket fire in that speech, and that was absolutely unacceptable.
This is where we're at, bro. Like, when we tell you these people are crazy, like, we're not kidding. But anyway, keep going.
Oh, Kwaku has something.
Well, okay. I'm very much annoyed by anybody who hey, so if I make a podcast all about why Brad Whitbeck is a terrible person.
Yeah.
And then a year later, Brad Whitbeck gets chosen to speak at a school. And I say, have you not seen the stuff I've made about him? This guy's polarizing. That seems like you're just, you know what I mean? Like you can't say someone's bad and then act later like everybody's saying this person. No, you did, guy. Yeah. Like you did. That is really annoying. I had when I was doing stuff at BYU Dems, we had this girl named Marin, and they were leading the whole one of the little honor code revolts, and they wanted to have me speak at one of the things, and I was like, I'm not really into your whole honor code revolt thing. But they had this group chat that screenshots got leaked, and they were like, Kwaku shouldn't be a part of this. Kwaku's way too controversial. And then the other girl was like, yeah, but if we kick him out, we're kicking out the only non-white person, and it looks really, really bad. And it's like, and he's the head of BYU Dems, so if you do that, it looks really bad. And it's like, well, he's so controversial. They're like, well, Marin, you tweeted about him like 55 times yesterday to get people riled up to be against him. You can't, like, the logic of that is just that's very disingenuous to me. And again, if we were talking about David Duke, you know what I mean, or some like actually a person with Nick Fuentes isn't speaking at SUU. It's Jeffrey R. Holland. Like, I mean,
they found a way to cancel Dr. Seuss. Actually, that's a good example. He's the Dr. Seuss of Mormonism. You know what I'm saying?
My sister, I won't say what position, but she had an important position at University of South Alabama, and she went to her campus daily, walked by a bunch of Confederate statues. People spoke at the university who had super, super strong Southern ties. Their family had been rich for years since the Civil War. We know what side. She was never like, actually, this person shouldn't be she was like, whatever. Now, I mean, like, do we not have a country in which people people on different sides of aisles can speak? And this isn't Nick Fuentes. This isn't this is an old dude.
To be fair, the one pushback, so I felt like Patrick and Jana's pushback was weak, but one pushback that he did make, maybe one of the only ones, was that he did say, I'm kind of a free speech guy, so while I think he is controversial, I do believe in free speech and that he could do it. But
let's see him.
Well, it's not in this exact part. It was actually an earlier part of the clip where he said when they were talking about this. But regardless, he did say, Patrick did say that he's a believer in free speech, so he isn't necessarily opposed to it. But I want you guys, the characterizations that John is making of the church and of Elder Holland, Like the fact that that isn't being responded to, I would come out and be like, "How? Like, what are you talking about? These people are out of their mind for going."
Yeah, are we going to see it? Because so far you've indicted Patrick Mason a bunch. We've never seen the poor guy talk.
Let's go and let's keep watching the clip.
Yeah.
So even further on the clip. Okay, cool. Let's see.
Well, in this one, it's Jana who offers the response.
Okay, well,
for a state university, that's me doing my best to represent, some of the students, LGBT SUU students that I talked to. Now, did I raise any hackles for you guys? Is that even a word, hackle?
I think it's a word.
Wow. And not really. Jana? I mean, not really for me, because I agree that it would be terrible to be in their shoes and
really, what? It would be terrible to be in their shoes, to have Elder Holland come and speak to you at your university. This is a prominent, active Latter-day Saint having a discussion with the biggest anti-Mormon out there, who just basically implied, I think you could say he implied, that the church is homophobic and bigoted, and that this leader is actually going to really cause a ton of distress for these students. And then you have this Latter-day Saint who's going, yeah, I agree. It'd be terrible for them.
Like, at what point, though, when you see responses like this, can you just start saying, like, okay, these people are not for the church?
Well, but also, because I'm a little bit just ignorant to this stuff, as far as, BYU is where I gave the original speech at, and then the other one would be another university in
Southern Utah.
Utah. What exactly, they said there was LGBTQ students at the school, right? So is it like, I'm just trying to get a little background.
Southern Utah University is a state university.
Yeah. So BYU, would there not be any LGBT students then?
No, there are there too.
But so that's what I'm just trying to get some background on the kind of whatever historical conflict, how that is at the universities right now. Because I'm assuming
basically a year ago, Elder Holland made a speech at BYU that the LGBTQ community has twisted into somehow attack against them. And ever since that speech at BYU, anytime he's been asked to do a speech anywhere else, just like if Ben Shapiro shows up or Michael Knowles shows up or anything like that, all the LGBTQ people have to protest. And Utah universities that have a unique relationship with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints just through proximity, oftentimes ask apostles and leaders of the church to show up, just like, I don't know, the University of Rome might ask the Pope to show up, right? So they've been protesting Elder Holland at any speaking engagement that they really ever can ever since this has happened. And unfortunately, instead of people like Jana Reiss, who is supposedly an intellectual and a journalist and
a faithful member of the church.
Faithful member. She says she's a faithful member of the church, but instead of being faithful and saying Elon Musk style, like, now hold on a second, we all know that's not true. It's disingenuous. And if you really love gays, especially gay Mormons or gay Utahns, you would want to disabuse them of the false narrative that the church does not love them.
Yeah.
And you're perpetuating the false narrative that the church does not love them by saying that this was a threat.
It's so weird to just be like nodding along to somebody saying, like, man, all those LGBTQ people should really feel afraid of this old guy, like,
yeah, making 17th century, like, really,
it's
we
literally making it worse.
I collect antique guns. Like, we stopped firing muskets in the late 1700s, early 1800s. All right. I mean, this is a 200-year-old. He might as well have said, take your scimitars. You know what I'm saying?
And Patrick in this interview, this particular section, this particular clip was where Jana
so far you haven't seen any. I'm calling you out. There's nothing on Patrick so far.
Well, go.
It's all been Jana Reiss and John Dehlin.
And
he was just nodding along to it, though.
I want everyone to watch the full thing. But I can tell you right now, there's no forceful pushback at all from him on this. And now the episode does end shortly after the clip that we're watching right now.
Okay.
But even earlier, he's sitting there saying, yeah, that speech that Elder Holland gave, it was problematic. It wasn't his best moment. He has a whole episode where he talks on Faith Matters podcast about how it was a problematic speech and why he was like basically ripping on Elder Holland in that episode. So again, the thing is, let's just zoom back for a minute. We have the biggest critic of the church here, or I'm not going to call him a critic, just full-on anti-Mormon, like apostate, hates the church, in John Dehlin, sitting there with Patrick Mason, and what's the conversation they decide to have? Well, let's talk about things that we think are wrong with the church, with this guy who is leading people astray, and offer additional legitimacy to the messages that he's putting out, which, by the way, everyone should know that Mormon news is also being published on the Mormon Stories channel. the biggest anti-Mormon channel out there, drawing more eyes and more views to that channel.
And making them money. You know what I'm saying? Actually, Cody mentioned something earlier that I thought was really funny. What was the first thing you noticed when I pulled up this YouTube clip, Cody?
Oh, what is a fundraiser tag on it?
Yeah, if I'm actually going to recenter this. I've never really noticed this before because I guess I'm just in it. But on the outside looking in, if I reframe this, if you look at it on the bottom left in green, it says it's a fundraiser. Yeah, Cody.
It should in the description tell you more about what the fundraiser is for. I believe it's how YouTube works. I think it's what they do.
Okay, well, we'll actually, oh no, it's not letting us. Look, when I go to click on it, it unfortunately isn't letting us. But I will tell you this. Mormon Stories Podcast is actually now an official 501c3 religiously protected organization whose only job is not actually uplifting the church, which you would be led to believe because Mormon Stories is a very popular children's song sung in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Its sole purpose is to produce anti-Mormon content. In fact, if you actually click on the Mormon Stories podcast, like we will right here, you'll notice that literally every single video is anti-Mormon, problematic Mormon revelations, Joseph Smith's failed revelations, Ensign Peak and SEC charges call-in. Is it a choice? The Great Mormon Missionary Decline. A gay Mormon marries a woman. Being gay. These are all hit jobs and hit pieces meant to create search engine optimization opportunities for legacy media and unknown parties to call in and get opinions on the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from people who actually hate it. It's a genius move, similar to what the Ku Klux Klan used to do when they bought up the URLs that had Martin Luther King in them when the internet was new.
Really?
And in fact, when I was first at BYU, one of the first classes I had to take was internet academics, and they taught you not only how to just cite the internet properly, but how to avoid bad spoof websites. And one of the first examples they pulled up was a white supremacist organization that had purchased like MartinLutherKingHistory.com and made this really nice history website on it that was just a hit piece on all of his prostitution activities.
Oh my
you know what I'm
gosh.
saying? Yeah, exactly. And it was literally just white supremacists trying to troll Martin Luther King.
Well, and I want to ask Cody this. Is it weird to you that two active Latter-day Saints that are high kind of visible figures are talking to the guy who makes anti-Mormon content about the church's problems and agreeing with him? I mean, is that weird to you? Or are we crazy?
I mean, from the outside, it's kind of hard to say exactly. Although, again, like just from, just a short clip, that clip definitely leads me to believe that there's like some big, like, I'm trying to find the right way to describe it. I was led to believe that there's some apparently like gay people wouldn't be allowed at BYU kind of like climate going on. I don't know
Dude, they sing show
BYU.
tunes. It is gay central.
Well, 'cause that's what I mean. It's like if this is
Mormons and Broadway.
So it's, we all you didn't go to BYU. You didn't be Hawaii.
I went to both, but I graduated from BYU.
Everyone here is BYU related. The building that was colloquially known as the gay building was a building called the HVAC, the Harris Fine Arts Center, because it was the musical theater building and such and such.
I lived Glee for 4 years in the HVAC. I lived Glee.
Same.
Their building wasn't big enough, so they've torn it down and they're giving them a bigger building. If you want to know how many LGBT BYU clubs there are, and there is a million. We did this. Remember this last time we went through? There's at least 17 Instagram pages, all different BYU LGBT. There are so many gay people in Provo. You would not believe how many. There's 3 houses on University Avenue leading to BYU where there's a big rainbow flag outside. Okay. So it's not like they're setting this up. Mm-hmm. This is the Westboro Baptist Church's school. It's not. It's not.
It all depends.
That's what I was kind of just from the short bit we saw. It was a little bit interesting to have the woman be like, "Oh my God, yeah." I mean, I'd be terrified of her or whatever she said.
Anti-Mormonism very much depends upon archetypes of other scandals. They try and co-opt the sexual scandals of the Catholic Church and say, "Oh yeah, Mormonism is like that too." They try and co-opt the animus of the Westboro Baptist Church towards gays and say, "Oh yeah, we have that problem too," even though literally the latest BYU Hawaii talk was done by a dude who played Rachmaninoff as a spiritual, as a spiritual
okay,
thought
but let's
on a
be
Tuesday.
Real though. Let's be real about that talk.
Devin Glenn Hatch or whatever his name was.
We should do an episode on
We'll
it.
do an episode on that one.
Come on.
Anyway, at the end of the day, BYU's loaded to the hilt with gay guys. All right. You're allowed to be Mormon and gay. This isn't the Westboro Baptist Church. Yet the anti-Mormons depend upon the stereotype and say actually very cruel things.
There's literally a website called mormonandgay.com.
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
for members of the church who are LGBTQ to figure out how to navigate it better within the church.
Yeah, and we've had Timber Harware and some really great representatives of the faith on there.
I was led to believe from the short clips we've seen they literally were not allowed on the campus. So.
Oh man,
it's funny.
That's a lot different than what I thought.
Okay, so keep going.
It kind of sounds like my assumptions about what was implied in some of this, at least in the clips that we've seen.
Well, let's hurry because I want to get to lizard people.
Let's go to the next one. Let's go to clip number 2. Now they're talking about the sex abuse scandals in the church. And again, here's these two faithful Latter-day Saints talking with John Dehlin as he kind of complains about what he sees in the church. And let's see what they do to defend the faith.
Okay, cool. So that's this one right here.
All right. What's next, Patrick?
All right. Well, let's go to the next topic. So, probably not a topic that anybody loves to talk about, but it's an important one. One of the news stories that came out this week was about a court case in Arizona around clergy confidentiality. And so, John, maybe you can talk us through some of the details of this, and then we can talk about it.
Well, I probably am not. I'm probably not the best to give details, but I'll just say that there was a very public and visible sexual abuse case out of Arizona, I believe, last year, kind of around the summer.
So first off, to me, this seems extremely disingenuous, if not just based upon time. Are they talking about recent news by bringing up a year-old scandal of a member who was excommunicated 8 years before he was indicted and then committed suicide in prison?
The reason why they're bringing it up is because the recent news is that the church won the lawsuit.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because all of the anti-Mormons tried to say that this is representative of the system.
Kind of like, hey, you're the biggest anti-Mormon out there. Why don't you give us your take? Why don't you explain the news to us on this story?
Okay,
That's
so
kind of weird.
we'll let him finish. We'll let him finish. Okay.
AP reporter Michael, is it Resendez? Is that how you pronounce it? Michael Resendez reported on it. And
by the way, that was super racist that he didn't pronounce that Latino name correctly, but keep going.
Yeah, and it all came down to kind of clergy privilege and whether bishops clergy
privilege? The guys that have to dress goofy in their outfits, if they're Protestant or if they're Catholic. Oh, and bishops, the dudes that work 25 hours a week for free.
He's talking about the legal definition of client.
Oh, I thought he was using the woke scold like, you have white privilege.
No.
So he's talking about attorney-client privilege, and he's talking about privileged conversations and confessions.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I thought for a second there he was trying to say the bishops are privileged. I was like, oh, that's hilarious.
Or stake presidents or Mormon church leaders, when they learn about a crime that's been committed in their capacity as church leaders, are they required to report it to authorities or not? These, in the Arizona case and in other cases like in West Virginia or elsewhere, generally speaking, my understanding is the church's law firm, Curtin & McConkie, has a history of telling bishops and leaders that they don't need to report or sometimes directly advising them not to report. And so I think that tendency was questioned in this lawsuit in Arizona, that practice with the church, with an eye of trying to get the Mormon church to encourage its church leaders to report known child abuse crimes to local law officials to let them kind of handle it. And it sounds like the Arizona Supreme Court came back and upheld the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints' desire and practice to not have to mandatorily become mandatory reporters of their ecclesiastical leaders. And
okay, can we just pause real quick right there? Again, my implication was, it seems like they're implying that the church is...
Well, no, ask Cody. What does it seem like he's saying the church does?
Yeah.
Ask him.
Yeah, what do you think that's implying?
Well, I mean, it does sound like there is perhaps other outstanding, the way he described it, it was really kind of vague and non-descriptive. But yeah, to me, it sounds like there's other outstanding cover-up of child assault that they're just not reporting on because it's the church.
Sounds a lot like the Spotlight scandal.
But what's interesting
Church,
to me, though,
right?
is as far as there's a case, I'm sure you guys mentioned this, but I'm pretty sure the Supreme Court just ruled they can't imprison a pastor for not turning it right. I'm sure they would like it if more crimes were reported, but what is the state going to do?
Yeah, the sad thing in this case is there was a mother that knew that that her husband, the father, was abusing their daughter, and talked to a Mormon bishop about it, and immediately he said, "Get the heck out of there. We'll put church funds into it if you have to, but get gone." There was also a home teacher who is the person that is assigned to checking in on the welfare once a month of another family in the congregation, who was also law enforcement. He was actually Border Patrol. And he said, "Get the heck out of there." They had excommunicated this guy. He hadn't shown up to church for 7 or 8 years, okay? But he was still abusing. And when they found out about it, they actually called the helpline. The church has a 100% free legal helpline for any of the pastors. They're actually called bishops, okay, to seek legal counsel, because these are volunteers. It's just like being the leader of a Boy Scout troop. You're going to be spending tons of volunteer hours, but you're a volunteer, okay? You're not a guy that has his MSW, his master's in social work, okay? You're a volunteer. So these volunteer clergymen have a number that they can call to get help. And specific to Arizona, there's some laws that say, look, if you violate privileged conversations, that's the same as a lawyer telling cops something that their client said. You might get the case tossed out against the child abuser if you violate that clergy privilege. So you need to have the wife call in and say, "My husband is abusing my kids," so that you can then be called to be a witness. Because if you do it, you're going to screw this whole thing up. They won't be able to nail the guy, and he's going to walk. So because of this kind of strange and Byzantine confusion in what the law in Arizona was, unfortunately, his father got away with, for longer than he should have, abusing his children while the mother permitted it. You know what I'm saying? He ends up going to prison, gets busted for it, and he ends up, committing suicide in prison and everything like that. And unfortunately,
the mom goes to prison.
And the mom goes to prison as well.
Is this, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, obviously, especially as someone who's not a practicer of any, I don't follow any religions, immediately I hear this, you think of the Catholic Church scandal. And it's the scale of that, I imagine, was much larger. Has there other, guys are obviously in the church, but has this been an issue that has been raised? Yeah,
is this another thing? The Catholic Church had 30 pastors, they were just moving around, they all started abusing kids, and it was the same area in Boston.
Has there been accusations that the church has been doing this in the past? Or is it the kind of thing where it's this is a messy situation that came to light, but for the most part, this isn't a recurring issue?
This is a messy situation that came to light specifically in Arizona. The church does not have a history of any kind of child abuse. We take all of our children very seriously. In fact, you have to be 2 in if you're even teaching Sunday school. I teach Sunday school with my wife. If I were to have somebody else substitute with me and I were a man, the protocol is Jacob Hansen would have to come with me and the door would be open.
Mm-hmm. And now something interesting, the reporter, the same guy who reported on the Catholic.
They tried to bring in the same guy that reported on the Catholic scandal.
He tried to do the same thing here. And the closest they have is this guy who is a bishop not reporting someone who is not even really technically a member of the congregation anymore. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of other cases, John Dehlin tries to reference the one out in Virginia, which is a slightly different case where there was an active member involved. And there is another one like it up in Oregon, but it's not like you have the prophet of the church shuffling around bishops who are actively molesting kids.
And by the way, we do not circle the wagons when it comes to that.
Yeah.
You have to understand. I mean,
we denounce every single one of those people.
Why didn't well, let's listen. Does Patrick and Jana, do they jump in like you guys are and give all this context?
Here's one thing.
Just kind of, and why, if you're going to do your news story, why are you bringing on the biggest anti-Mormon out there to talk about this issue?
And fundraising for him.
It's
So here's one thing that I hope Patrick will say leading up to this, because John Dehlin at the very end of this says, it's the church's desire to cover this up that is being supported by this
he always
decision.
assigns dirty motives.
He assigns that motive. What I hope we'll see Patrick Mason say is something along the lines of what Cardin was saying with the context of, hey, it's not the church's desire. They have Curtin McConkie help the bishops understand their local laws and try to act in accordance to what their local law allows them to do.
And the only thing I would say to put this to bed, because I haven't seen this episode, I only saw the first one. To me, it is fair to say the church has robust protocols to protect children. Like any good system, there are bad apples. And if there's 16 million of us, of course, there will be isolated incidents in which, unfortunately, the unspeakable happens. However, it is not at all indicative of the culture or the training that is offered in the church at all. In fact, I would say we're above average.
Let's see if that's what's implied in their messaging.
Okay, let's do it. Let's see it. Hey, did Patrick Mason come to bat for us?
Mentioning that the church responded to this Supreme Court ruling by saying, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints agrees with the Arizona Supreme Court's decision. We are deeply saddened by the abuse these children suffered. The church has no tolerance of abuse of any kind. That's my attempt at a summary. Tell me if I got it wrong or if you guys want to add anything.
No, I think that's right. And of course, I think the one key thing to recognize is the Supreme Court said that this falls under the confidentiality of the confessional setting that happens between a clergy member and somebody who comes to confess a sin or
did he not understand the implications that John Dehlin was making? Like, did he just miss it?
Is Patrick Mason trying to just like score points with John Dehlin so he gets his own like?
I don't know. I'm watching this and it's just like.
Okay, do we keep going on this clip or is there another
keep going.
one?
I want you to hear what Jana has to say as well in the same clip as they keep going. She jumps in as well.
Okay.
Talk about things. So, which is a long-standing practice, of course, in the United States and other countries, the confidentiality there. Jana, what do you make sense? Or how do you make sense of this case?
Well, the Supreme Court decision from Arizona was not actually very surprising. That they upheld clergy penitent privilege is what I think most people expected from a legal point of view. I am not a legal expert, but I seem to be seeing that this was not surprising.
That's the phrase. Clergy penitent privilege.
That's the one.
That's what I was looking for. When he called it clergy privilege before, I was like, are you kidding me? Okay, keep going.
What is a trickier situation for the church is the fact that the church doesn't seem to have done much to stop this except for excommunicating the
except for excommunicating the guy, literally offering money to the wife to escape with her kids, telling the wife to call the cops, sending the home teacher over. They, literally, if this were the 1800s, they would have formed a posse and would have hung the guy from a freaking tree. But that's illegal now. Like, what? How could she say this?
Exactly. Remember, the point of this thing is, as we're listening to this episode, there are these implications that the church is harmful to gay people, that Elder Holland is problematic, that the church is hiding abuse. If we want to go on,
all
the last
they did
clip,
was excommunicate the guy.
It's very. The thing is, it's like John Dehlin. I couldn't help it when I watched the episode. I want everyone to watch the full episode, just so you know. I couldn't help but be like watching John Dehlin, being like, "Oh my gosh!" Like they're just like going along with everything. This is wonderful.
Yeah, John Dehlin is a genius.
So man. I mean, they just completely ignore the complexity of Arizona's actual law.
I mean,
they treat it like they tried to hide it. All three of them are treating it as though the church tried to hide this thing. Why? Why would they?
By the way, when they ask, I don't think Patrick Mason and Jana Reiss are worthy of a temple recommend. If they ask you, do you associate with people that are actively advocating against the church? And it's one thing to have a debate with somebody. It's one thing to have a conversation, engage with them. But when you offer them content using the credibility of your name as a church historian and as a church author in order to fundraise for the number one anti-Mormon who is on the record as having lied about your institution, on the record in forensic interviews as having sexually assaulted female employees, on the record with like 14 signatures from Kate Kelly and other civil rights not employees, but activists for women's rights and so on and so forth. If you have the trail of blood behind you, the home wrecking for profit, the broken homes, and then see fit to offer him your time, your talents to build the kingdom. I'm sorry, your time and your talents to fundraise for the biggest anti-Mormon. How can you say yes to that temple recommend question?
Well, and my thing is...
No, that's my question. I have a question for Patrick Mason.
Yeah.
How can you, Patrick Mason, I'm down with engagement. all day long. We have to engage with the worst of us. Trump had to go meet in Seoul, Korea, at the 38th parallel with Kim Jong-il, take pictures, stop the war from happening. I get it. You have to sign papers with the Confederates in the courthouse. You might even have to debate with these people on occasion. But how can you offer your time, your talent, your energy, your resources, and your clout to fundraise for the Mormon Stories podcast?
Is it for the fun? Is the fundraiser for the Mormon Stories podcast on this, or is it for their new
show? Maybe
show.
It's on the Mormon Stories podcast page. Look at this. It's right here. I'm going to move it right here so everybody can see it.
Oh yeah, it does say Mormon Stories.
Mormon Stories podcast fundraiser.
Okay, I hate to play devil's advocate.
Okay, no, you don't.
But
you love it.
It's your favorite.
This is my authentic reaction. I don't care if it makes people mad. They're so far watching this. We missed their church growth thing. It's always the same thing. There's not as many people as they think because they're trying to count Africans or whatever. There's always something weird about that.
And there's always something like horribly racist, like the church only grows in Africa because people are stupid there.
It only grows with those dirty those. Great.
I'm gonna edit that one.
But the SUU stuff is bogus. They kind of have a point on this one, though. I think. Let me finish. We got too many pedos in the church. We for sure do.
Okay.
I think.
Okay.
And we should absolutely get rid of every single one.
If that is the case, okay, fine. Would you go, Kwaku, using your influence on with John Dehlin onto your show to complain about that and validate him in order to build his clout? Do you guys see that this isn't really even about the content specifically of this episode per se? It's the fact that you're getting together with John Dehlin and you're whining about the church together.
And I would challenge that statement with a full-throated,
I would as well.
Full-throated rebuttal.
Well, does the church have a history of turning over people to law enforcement who commit other crimes?
Yes.
No,
By the way,
no. They don't turn people in who have.
Oh, not if you no.
Who
have?
Sorry, similar situation but different crime to the situation in Arizona. Let's say they robbed a bank. Like, would the church historically go to the law enforcement and say one of our members robbed a bank? Or is
it's kind of tricky.
And this is what Curtin McConkie has to do. They have to deal with each individual state's law because it's different in different places, right? So you have. In Arizona, the client clergy privilege may say one thing, while over in Wyoming, it may say, no, you have to be a mandatory reporter, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the hotline exists, is to help bishops not screw up court cases. And they totally portray it here as if the church is trying to do to hide.
The line that blew me away was he said the church desires to hide these things.
Yes.
And then 2 seconds later, you hear him say, I agree.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And Kwaku, would you agree with that you can conclude from what we know that the church is actively trying to hide?
Well, so I think
sex abuse scandal stuff?
No. I mean, okay, when we say the church, do I think the brethren are trying to hide it? No. Do I think your average bishop? No. Do I think that there are some people that are at Curtin McConkie or in like church bureaucracy that may want to? Probably. Because I've met some of those people.
Well, and when you say, "Oh, we got we got too many of those in the church," I would say we are far below average any institution our size because of our protective protocols that keep children safe within the walls of our church.
I also think we just have less people that are predators like that. I don't see any evidence.
Yeah.
If you want to compare us to Utopia,
Well,
sure, we're not perfect, but if you compare us to almost any other institution of similar size, you're going to find that there's no difference. There's no, like, anytime you have this many people, you're going to have some perverts
and I think that might be a podcast
ranks.
topic. Let's say our church, SDA, Seventh-day Adventists, J-Dubs, is Christian Science still pulling? I'm not sure if they are.
No.
But
The public school system, maybe.
Yeah, I'm not going to count them because that's not a church, but like... it's kind of like this. It's kind of like
You see a lot of legacy media articles because they come after us post Prop 8. They don't come after the teachers' unions. They don't come after they don't go after Hollywood. They don't go after any of the liberal strongholds. They only come after and publish the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm not saying that they're innocent. I just want all pedophiles to go away.
Yeah,
and I don't want any pedos in churches. Yeah, we all agree on this.
But do you
The
understand?
church
There's
talks about how it's better a millstone would be hung around their necks than that they.
No, I know.
offend the little
I'm
children.
just saying. I want to give the elephant in the room here. I'm no fan of who is this?
Jana
Reiss. Why does she have the glasses? I'm not a fan of Jana Reiss. I'm not a fan of Mormon Stories podcast. I don't really know Patrick Mason. I just know my old professor tried to get me to buy his book 9 times. But like, I mean, I do think probably things like this. I would like to see the church have like. I don't think something like this deserves just a statement. Like I want to see a hardcore like.
Like, what do you want to see?
but-
Do you
well,
want to see the church advocate for mandatory reporting of everything, so that no one ever confesses again? This is a legal issue.
No.
What do you want different?
No, we're gonna
Okay,
put
I'll tell you 2 things.
Oh, hold on, but Kwaku, here's the difference, bro. You're speaking from a place of ignorance, and I say this lovingly, and I'm saying that not in a pejorative function, but you do not have children. Trust me, Brad Whitbeck, Jacob Hansen, and I know what it's like to have children and know that you would never send them in a place where you weren't 100% sure that they were safe. And I've had callings that you haven't had. You've been in a singles ward. You were baptized as a teenager, and then you've served in a singles ward. So your only real experience with any of the family wards where children are present is based off of basically news articles and what you've heard secondhand. And I can testify as a person who has participated now for nearly 20 years in family wards. I feel 100% safe that my children are safe with the people, the protocols, and the politics within the 4 walls of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I know that Jacob Hansen feels that way, and I know Brad Whitbeck feels that way, and we speak from a place of 100% experience that
Right.
you don't have.
But all I'm saying is we should look into the data, because if you say we need to
That's
compare ourselves
fine.
to other groups,
That's fine.
I think we should actually do that.
I don't think
Let's do it.
I don't
Let's
have
do
a
an
problem with
episode
that,
on
but
that.
I will
We
say,
are.
but I will say,
I also want to answer the question that was before. We don't I like, because this is different than any other subject. If you funnel money from an organization you're a part of and you repent of that, I'm not saying the church needs to get involved in that, but we're talking about top 3 worst sins of all time you can do, and one of them is this thing. And so I think this deserves, like, with the amount of articles, not repeat articles of repeat offenders, of different offenders from 2020 to now, there's too freaking many. I would love to see a
Okay, we'll name
harsh
it. Like,
conference
okay,
talk.
that's fine. Hold on, real quick. Like, this is one of those things that I even will say John Dehlin and all of us agree on. Like, we need to protect children. But here's the thing. There's only one group in this conversation, and it includes 2 active Latter-day Saints, who are implying that the church has a desire to block the ability to go after child abusers.
Yeah, and I disagree with that. That's ridiculous.
Yes,
And that's see,
that's what is so maddening.
My point here is, like, we don't need to have a conversation. I mean, I guess we could have that conversation about protecting kids. Like, great. But my point here in this and what we're talking about here is just that, do you see how they weaponize this?
I see what you're saying, but when they say the church, are they saying the brethren of the church, or are they talking about the bureaucracies?
They are going to make it as vague as possible to make the church look as bad as possible.
Because who is the guy on Twitter? He's an ex-mo, but he's a big Twitter guy in Utah, and he
I wish that narrowed it down more.
Yeah, no, he's a big Twitter guy in Utah, but he worked for Curtin McConkie. He's openly gay. He's married to a man. He gets a ton of retweets and likes in Utah. But
Is it the guy who's always talking about his husband?
Yeah.
What's that guy's name?
I can't remember his name. Anyway,
Yeah.
he worked for Curtin McConkie.
Yeah.
And when all this news came out, he was even getting canceled by his own side. And he was like, look, I'm sorry. We kind of played a role in, like, covering this up. So there's more legs to this thing. So when they say the church, if they're saying Russell M. Nelson and Jeffrey R. Holland want to cover this up, I don't believe that's true. But if they're saying the church, by extension, Curtin McConkie, there could be a case
if they
to
wanted
make
to make a
Okay,
case that Curtin
here's the deal.
McConkie didn't handle the legal procedures right and that was a problem, that's fine. But that's not what the implication is. Do you think John Dehlin really cares about that level of nuance?
No, but I'm saying, though, is that Patrick Mason's implication? That's what, so let's say if John is once pinned this on the brethren, but he's saying the church. And if your job as a church scholar is all day long, you're dealing with the church, that's compartmentalized in like 6 different areas. So not trying to assign anything ill to Patrick Mason, but is he hearing that and thinking, oh yeah, you're right, because Kurt McConkie sucks, whereas John Dehlin is saying...
Why wouldn't he say that, though?
Yeah, you don't say
that's because they've been recording for an hour. You know what I mean?
You don't listen to John Dehlin just say what he says and then go, I agree.
I'll wrap it up. I'll basically just sit here, finish what you want to say.
I'm giving him a little bit of grace here on this touchy subject.
With this touchy subject in mind, by the way, because we've actually had factual errors committed by everyone who's tried to speak about it. Anyone who wants to know the details of the case and understand it, go to mormoner.org. They have literally every document, court transcript about this case so that you can familiarize yourself with it and understand it. Having read the stuff there, I am 100% of the opinion that it's a horrible thing that happened. It is incredibly sad. The fact that the judgment on this case was there to say that the church was correct to have the client clergy privilege the way that they have is, I think, a pretty big deal, that the church was trying to make sure they were doing the right thing legally. There's questions to talk about with whether it's the right thing morally, but it gets into a deeper, more difficult conversation of like, okay, does clergy penitent privilege need to exist for things like this? And what will that do to the bishop's ecclesiastical ability to try to help people who are in this difficult situation if people know they cannot confess without being turned in, right? Will that just prolong things more? So that's a deeper conversation to be had with this that gets ignored and used by people like John Dehlin to then say, hey, no, this is just the church trying to save face, when it's not. This is about how do we, at a deeper level, try to help people the best we can and within the legal system we have.
Also, the fact that we're even engaged in this level of conversation, I have such a problem with, because these people do not care.
Yes.
Okay.
That's my point.
They do not care. They're throwing spaghetti at the wall, seeing what sticks. They specifically use vagaries in order to put us on the defensive to try and reveal what some kind of flaw in our system might be, so they could pretend to care about that flaw in the system and then try and co-opt other scandals from other churches and other things like that to say, oh yeah, that applies here, just to make the church look bad. And academia hates religion. Academia hates religion because it's the only other prominent challenge to their power. If it were not for priests, pastors, and prophets out there in saying, thus saith the Lord, the number one most powerful statement in our lexicon would be studies show. And all the academics would literally run the show 100%. So they hate religion. Okay, it's in their DNA, and it's obvious that Patrick Mason and Jana Reiss, okay, have their tents pointed towards academic Sodom. Okay, through their speech, through their linguistics, they're approaching this from that angle. Mm-hmm. Okay,
and part of the reason, Kwaku, why I'm kind of like not giving as much grace to Patrick Mason on not disagreeing with this in any level is because I watched the first episode of this and it was the same thing. Every single dirty implication that John Dehlin threw in, every insinuation, Patrick Mason just nodded along. He didn't do anything to push back on anything that John Dehlin said.
Let's wrap this up because this is just putting me in a bad mood.
I want to, this is my whole point with this, and this is the reason I wanted to talk about it. It doesn't actually have to do with the specific issues. Like, we could sit here and have a discussion about, does the church do enough to help, with child abuse cases or whatever. We can talk about the legality of it. This is the thing. He's talking with John Dehlin. John Dehlin is giving the explanation, and then there's a super soft pushback. This whole problem is that they're granting legitimacy and credibility to this man instead of fighting back against him. If I was going to have a conversation with John Dehlin, which, by the way, I'm totally willing to, you can come and talk to me anytime, I will hear your entire argument out, but then I'm going to push back, and I'm going to push back hard. And
if Mason was on a podcast with a faithful, believing member talking about this, it's different than when he goes to enemy territory.
And that's
no, I get that. I get that.
But he's making money for John Dehlin.
I want to, again, the implications that I walked away from this podcast with was the implication that the church is harmful to gay people, that Elder Holland is bigoted or is problematic at the very least towards gay people, that the church desires to hide sexual predation within the church. And then we didn't get time to get into it, but people can watch the full thing. Also, there's an implication that the church is being dishonest with the way that it reports its membership numbers and things like General Conference.
Can we grab that last one?
Okay, let's do the last one and let's end this.
Okay, we'll just hit it.
like,
We'll just hit it. We'll go to the very last clip.
I can't believe that I'm considered a member who's made the same covenants as this guy has, with our performance being so disparate.
So let's go to the very last clip. Let's skip
Last
number
clip.
3. Go to
Here
number
we
4.
go.
Real quick, before we go to just the context is they're talking about this data that's out there. They kind of say, okay, they give this 17 million number and everyone's all rah about that. But it's like, but they're kind of like they're hiding the activity rates and other things. Cause like, just cause it's 17 million, like what does that say? It doesn't really say anything. And I thought this next clip was kind of telling about the way that they felt about the dishonesty of the church. So go and roll the last one.
You guys would both agree, and I know we got to move on. You guys would both agree that the church probably has really good data on actual activity rates and actual membership rates, but like finances, that would you agree they've just made a conscious decision not to share that, or would you view it like maybe like the Catholic Church, they don't have good numbers? Do you either
Oh no, they have excellent numbers. The church employs a force of very well-trained, outstanding social scientists who work for the church. And
hold on a second. Has anybody ever served a mission? I served in Buenos Aires.
He did.
And all the first 6 weeks of going to a new area was just trying to comb over the ward list and figure out who was there, who was named properly, who hadn't moved to Tucumán, who like figuring out who is actually present. And then when you go to church, there's a guy that counts the number of people that show up and reports an attendance number. But you don't know if there's visitors that are coming in for Easter, if they're coming in for a child's baptism, if they're coming in for a baby blessing. Well, we have some basic rudimentary math.
But there's a deeper point here even than that. And that is, remember how he mentions the finances? John Dehlin talks all day long about the church's nefarious finances and they keep it all hidden from the members, right? And he says, the church has good data, but like finances, they intentionally are keeping this from the members.
I worked for the census in New York City, bro, in 2010.
Uh-huh.
And the census, as poorly run as it is I mean, the U.S. government doesn't have good stats. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints doesn't have good stats. I think they got a pretty good handle on how many members there are. That's the only, how many people have been baptized in their church.
But
is I think the only stat that the church actually has a decent hold on. But in terms of activity.
But even if they did, the point here, the point here is the implication that the church is being dishonest. Exactly.
Yeah.
So why don't you defend it?
Yeah. Okay, let's see what Jana Reiss has to say.
Mason says.
Till actually the 1980s and maybe the mid to late 1980s, some of that research was published. In fact, if you look at old issues of Dialogue, you can see articles that draw upon some of that research from the church, which is a gold mine. If you're looking at trying to figure out what the church was like at that particular time, but it then stopped making that available to public researchers.
Keep playing.
Well, and I'm sure it was because they wanted to hide something. That's the only option.
It's the implication.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's the implication.
So if either of you had to just go ahead, Patrick.
No, go ahead. Yeah, let's wrap up this topic. If you were to just kind of give a one sentence summary,
something else.
I wonder, was he gonna say something to actually push back on it and then just gave up? Like what?
Well, also, I mean, again, just the kind of underlying theme I've gathered from this is all three of these individuals seem to think that church organization or whatever is not.
They're trying to co-opt the Scientology scheme.
Real quick, let him finish.
Well, it sounds like every single point they've made gets back to you just can't trust the church. They're going to cover up this. They're going to cover up that. They're going to lie about this. They secretly mean this when they say that. My larger point is there? I mean, they're two of those members of the church, but is there historical reason? Has there been stuff that's happened in recent history where members have not, kind of like lost faith, right? But like lost trust in some of the church organizations. They had to earn that back over the years, or is this something?
There was a there's a scandal that is brewing in which the Scientologist church is supposedly building buildings for members that they don't have as a flex for a population that they don't actually pastor. And again, just like anti-Mormons always try and co-opt other churches' scandals and then shove them into the Mormon box, John Dehlin and all the anti-Mormons have been saying that, like, oh, since so many of us and our friends have gone inactive, there's no way the church is actually growing. There's no way their numbers are increasing. And yes, faith in North America is kind of on the decline. The Mormon church is better than other institutions, but we've noticed a larger amount of inactivity, especially amongst millennials. But there's no widespread hiding who's decided to leave. There's no lying numbers where we count 13 million but then say there's 20 million. There's none of that going on, but they're co-opting scandals from other churches to try and make us look bad, and it's dishonest.
And to be fair, they do say, Jana at least does say, that the church is doing pretty well compared to other churches as far as its growth's going, but then they also say, but the church seems to be being, again, it's not being fully transparent, they're hiding things, this seems to be dishonest. And again, I think you hit it on the head, Cody, is that the overall theme that you're walking away from this interview, here you have two prominent faithful members talking to the leading anti-Mormon, and the thing you walk away from the conversation with is the church isn't trustworthy. Like,
so do you think
that's shocking to me? Like,
what's
you guys
the
gotta
reason then
this.
that do we think, I hate to assign a motive to a guy live, but I mean that's effectively what we're doing. So do we think that Patrick Mason is trying to just stay friendly? Do we think he agrees with John, or what's each of your takeaways here on Patrick Mason? Because I have no clue. I don't know if he's just being kind of a coward. I don't know if he's playing 5D chess here and he's trying to get on really good. Because sometimes you gotta get into the cave before you light it on fire. Like, what do you think?
Can I actually answer first?
You go. I got my opinion. You go
just
first.
because I was the one who kind of brought this to the attention here. First of all, I do not think Patrick Mason is a bad guy. I don't think he's a bad faith actor. I don't think any of that. I think that he has something in his mind where he's like, well, I'm going to try and reach across the aisle here. Me and John, I think him and John did an interview on John's channel, and so they ended up forming kind of a personal bond. I think that he's a very, very kind guy. He's reached out to me, and we've personally even talked about this very issue, and he was very gracious about it. So I have no doubt that he's a good guy.
He responds to you. Good job.
So so Patrick is a good guy. Here's my issue: is that he does agree with John on some of these topics. He did agree before this that Elder Holland's speech was problematic. He agrees that, maybe these numbers aren't the best to go with. He agrees that, maybe we need to do mandatory reporting all the way around. And so he has critiques of the church that John does as well, but for some reason he thinks it's a good idea to meet with John publicly and discuss the things that, John, I kind of think you have some valid points about your criticism of the church. And I'm going to reach across the aisle and provide a platform where we can kind of nod together and talk about things that maybe need to improve in our church. And I think that's not what you do with the leading attacker of our faith.
For me, I would say my take is, at best, he's getting played. He's naive and foolish to the internet game because he's an academic. And I would give him grace to leave open the door, the possibility that he doesn't understand how he is being used. That's the at best scenario. The at worst scenario is that paradigms are on display. Seems to me that all three of these people share a paradigm. They believe that thus saith the Lord doesn't carry much weight as studies show. They seem to share the presupposition that supposedly naturalistic observations, as seen through the lens of academia, are of more worth, more importance, and carry more weight than priesthood authority, tradition, wisdom of the ancients, whatever you want to call it, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that academia has something to teach, both in terms of content and in protocols, to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Not that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has goodness to infuse into academia, because through their speech and their behavior, it's obvious that they think the academic take is the correct take by the authority and credence they give all of the scholars and the studies, and that's we all know has been proven false because we all lived through COVID and we all survived the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. You know what I'm saying? So they think science TM is still science. And to me, at worst, paradigms are on display. And these people, their tent is pointed towards Sodom / academia, and academia hates the church. So they're struggling to work it out at best. They haven't completely worked it out and think academia has it more right at worst.
And I think, sorry,
Oh.
Brad, you say your thing and then
Yeah, so in order to try to like better contextualize my thoughts on this, I tried watching some other stuff that Patrick Mason had done just to see how he conducts himself in his interviews, because he's done a lot of different podcasts with a lot of different people. And I worry, because first off, I want to say I think Jacob Hansen is right. I think Patrick Mason's a good guy. I don't think he's out here doing something nefarious with this. I don't think he's trying to do anything like two-faced with setting this up. But he strikes me as somebody who will not push back against other people very often at all. I think he avoids confrontation to a point that he ends up letting other people kind of make a lot of points. I've seen him maybe once give somebody a like solid answer against what they had to say in the podcast that I've watched with him. And I think he's just trying to be agreeable. I think he's just trying to be nice. And in doing that, I don't know if he realizes the level of credence he's giving John Dehlin in this.
And we don't say this just to bash on the guy. Really, the only reason why this is relevant is because we recognize what internet activism, especially the lies told by anti-Mormon, ex-Mormon, cry-bully woke scolds like John Dehlin, we see the toll that his home wrecking for profit has had on our families, on our congregations, and in our faith, and that we need to, as Elder Holtland said, we need to have a trowel in one hand and a musket in the other. We've been so used to building the kingdom with the trowels that we forgot how to fight back, and you can no longer just agree with cry bully attacks like he's doing. And we say this to hopefully empower others to not be so naive and pushed over.
Or Patrick on future episodes, I guess.
And by the way, Patrick, feel free to reach out. If you think we go wrong on this, you're welcome to come on our program and talk about your half of the argument.
Words in this.
Yeah, and I want people to listen to the full episode, just so you know. But I will say, just as a little note of irony, when you're talking about sexual abuse with someone who is a credibly accused sexual abuser, that just is a little awkward.
You're talking about the forensic testimony of Rosebud and the civil rights department in New Hampshire, and the open source information Kate Kelly is often referenced.
And I think him, also, though, what gets me is, I don't want people to walk away from that interview thinking that it's the ex-Mormons who are the only ones attuned to any sort of abuse happening in the Mormon community or Utah at large. Remember, the only person with political power to ever come after me was a guy who was the district attorney of Utah County, who publicly blasted me on the news and then had to deny being a cannibal and a pedophile, and then had a video leaked of him admitting to traveling to Montana to forcibly adopt a Native American kid and ship that kid to Ukraine so they could get buffalo before he lost re-election by 70% because of said video. This is a real thing.
And he denied the cannibalism.
He had to do a public...
without anyone having, like, accused him of it.
Yeah.
He
it turns out they were investigating something called SRA, satanic ritual abuse, in which people were claiming they were kidnapped and had crazy things happen to them. And he comes out an hour later at a press conference and goes, "I'm not a cannibal or a pedophile." And everybody who watched it went, "That guy's probably both cannibal and a pedophile." That's the only guy with political power to come after me.
Wrap it up, Brad.
Here's the thing. I wonder, and I just want to say for Patrick Mason, if you see this ever, did you intend for people to come away from watching that episode of your show feeling like they can't trust the church? Is that what you wanted them to think? Is that part of your goal with this show, to make it so people feel like they can't trust the institutional church and that they should, I don't know, look to, I guess, John Dehlin for how to think about it. I don't know. I mean, what is your goal with this episode? I know that I read some of the stated goal being something about having diverse opinions, but I didn't see any real diversity of opinions in this show. Did that seem to be diverse, Cody, in its presentation?
Again, as somebody from the outside, I leave this definitely, of course, just short clips. I don't know, didn't see the whole interview, but definitely the bits I've seen, it does seem like I would leave with the impression that a large percentage of Mormons have a fairly healthy level of skepticism for the things that are being told from the church.
Okay. So that, I think, is a solid takeaway. Patrick, is that your goal? Is that what you want? And what are you going to do to try to make it different if it's not?
But do you even care, though?
Yeah.
Because if your tent is pointed towards Sodom, you miss Sodom, and you don't want to flee Babylon. You want to go back. So, again, I'm not his head. I can't know his intentions. I can say the performance was abysmal. I've seen other clips that Jacob Hansen has put together where he's advocating for the change of temple ceremony, saying that we need to engage in activism and bottom up protesting the church and how it treats the LGBTQ community with the temple ceremonies and so on and so forth. And I'm sure that this is the 1% and that there's a 99% out there that we agree on stuff like that. However, when you start showing up on people that I know for a fact have lied about me personally, but
when will he come out and admit that his name is
all right, that's a really good question. So any last words before we go? That's it. All right, this is Midnight Strike Through Mormons. Tell us where we go wrong in the comments below. We'll see you guys in the next program.